Whoa, welcome back to the Negative Space Podcast. I am not a federal agent, and this is episode number 3. Wow, that is 3 weeks. Well, is it technically 3 weeks ago? Because I've been uploading these on Saturday, and this is Sunday that I'm recording it. I really delayed on writing the script for this, even though it was going to be really easy, because gathering the information for this is going to be really, really simple. I was just so burnt out by the end of the work days this week that I just didn't even think about it. But anyway, not gonna slow down. We keep grinding, I keep yapping, and this thing keeps on keeping on. And today, last time we got a little theological, but today we're getting even more theological. This might be the most theological episode I ever do on this podcast, because today we are doing something a little itty bitty bit different, and we are talking about biblical conspiracies that grind my gears. That's right. They smoke my ham, they grill my steak, and they prune my leaves. So we will get into that. But first, I've considered the future of this podcast and where I want to take it. And I think I've settled on a goal, not very reasonable, but something that will be a good enough carrot on a stick that I will keep on chasing it until I get it. I want to be sponsored by Aldi. I already messaged them on Instagram asking about it, and I see in their response, I haven't opened it up, but it says, "Hi, unfortunately and then it just cuts off because it's too long. I do not want to open that up, but you know what? They're going to be sorry when this podcast blows up, and I've got a billion people listening to it, and they could have gotten in on the ground floor, but it's okay. When that happens, I will have my arms open to Aldi saying, hey, if you want to finally sponsor this, you know what? I'll give you a discount. I'll give you a discount like you've given me a discount, and we'll make this happen, Cap'n." But anyway, yeah, I really want the Aldi sponsorship. I almost exclusively shop there, and if not there, I'm at their sister brand, Trader Joe's, which is owned by the same German company. So I'm a fan of balling on a budget and not paying an arm and a leg just to eat in Los Angeles, and everything tastes better to me because I got it on a cheaper price. And you see, I'm naturally shilling for them, and they're not even paying me. So imagine how good it would be if they actually did pay me to shill for them. In the middle of the episode, I wouldn't even start at the beginning. In the middle of the episode, I'd say, and you know what's not a conspiracy theory? How much money you can save by just shopping at Aldi for all your organic produce. The best part, if any of them have a problem, they got a twice as nice guarantee. They'll give you what you got, what you needed. You give you a fresh version of it, and they'll give you your money back. That's freaking crazy. See, I'm a shill, but right now I'm shilling for free. When I moved to LA, I didn't know where the nearest Aldi was to me. In fact, I hadn't gone to one in a minute, because where I lived before, there was a Stater Brothers, literally a 2-minute walk from where I lived. So I just walked there, walked back, and it was good. But I went to a Pavilions once because I heard that it's a good place to shop, and I was in the area anyway, and I needed groceries. I walked in and I saw $7 strawberries. Are you kidding me? $7 pesticide strawberries? No, thank you. That immediately triggered a fight or flight response in me. I always get that mixed up. I can never say that phrase. It immediately triggered that response in me. I walked straight out of the shop because they were like right in the entrance. I did like an immediate 180, walked out of there, got back in my car, and looked on Google Maps where the nearest Aldi was. Whew. I'm all fired up. And you know what? I need to save that money on groceries because the streets in LA suck, and I'm convinced that the raggedy streets of Los Angeles are causing problems in my car. Either that or the Rothschilds are after me because they hate that I'm making this podcast, and I'm eventually going to get to them and their devious doings. But in all seriousness, actually this is in all seriousness, this is half ironic, half serious, and basically a big pipe dream. If I can find irrefutable evidence that driving over the streets in Los Angeles in my car that, albeit has a very delicate suspension. You go over one little bump and you feel it shake the entire car. But I got no control over that. I didn't choose. I actually didn't even choose this car. Someone else chose it for me, and I'm just driving it. But anyway, if I can find evidence that the streets of Los Angeles have been making my car leak oil and now coolant, I will I will start a class action lawsuit. Probably for legal reasons I don't even know. I'll just say that that's a joke. This is all, remember, this is all allegedly. This is all post-ironic humor, and I don't want to catch a case because wait, no, actually that I'm not going to use that phrase. That has different implications. I do not want to be taken to court because I say something on this podcast and someone's like, hey, that's libel, that's slander. I'm not doing that, okay? So remember, this is all allegedly, this is all for fun, this is all haha goof. It's for the goofs, it's for the goofs. It's not real. But anyway, now that I'm all fired up, let's tackle several topics that I cannot stand. They boil my goose, okay? Deep breaths before I get into this, because if I don't, I'm going to get so fired up that I'm going to have an aneurysm. And there's just going to be a bunch of blank space at the end of this podcast because I'm going to be, on the floor. I'm going to be dialing for 911 because I'm having an aneurysm. And, yeah, that wouldn't be a very entertaining, actually, maybe that would be an entertaining episode. I don't know. If you want me to have an aneurysm on the podcast, please leave a comment and tell me that you want that. Just comment aneurysm and I'll know. But let's take a look at this first thing that just really, really drives me nuts, okay? So I was scrolling Instagram, as I do. By the way, follow the podcast Instagram, _space.pod. And I came across this video, and it's about this dude with his Italian Bible trying to say that the Bible teaches a flat earth. It's because it has this diagram in it that is we'll get to where that comes from, but it's got this diagram in it, and he breaks it down. You know what? I'll just leave the link in there to in the comments or in the description for you to watch, because I don't know how I can play it without it sounding bad on the microphone and having to cut it out and do all that stuff if it sounds bad. I try to do all this stuff in one take, all right? So don't blame me. But basically his argument is that, okay, so he's got this old Italian Bible, and it's got this drawing of what the Bible says that the earth looks like, and you got the mountain of God above the firmament, which is the waters above the earth, which has it has the sky is like this big solid rock above the earth, and then you got the stars in there, and then you got the ocean and the land and on the earth, and then you got beneath the earth you have Sheol, and then underneath Sheol you've got the great deep, I think it's what it's called, and here it just says in fairy, which I think is like whatever. I don't care too much about the Italian. I don't care much about Italy in general, even though it would be kind of cool to visit there. Anyway, I'm getting off track. He says, oh yeah, so this is what the Bible teaches about the shape of the earth, and look at all these other religions from the time that have similar drawings, similar sketches, similar diagrams of what the earth looks like. Okay. So I think I made it pretty clear that, I should note too that that he says that this teaches that the earth is flat, that the powers that be who say that the earth is round, they are lying to us. The earth is not a globe. He says it's flat, and that is the Bible's definitive teaching on the shape of the earth. Okay, so I think I made it pretty clear that if anybody wants to believe and postulate that NASA is run by Satan, it's me. I'm just that type of guy that would love that. I mean, love it in a way that I would hate it, but talking about it, But the claim that the definitive shape of the earth is found in the Bible, just that's just wrong, okay? Look, it's just wrong. Now, this guy and I, John.truth, I think is his account. Let me just verify. Yes, JON.truth. We can agree that the Bible should be our foundation of truth, that it is the inspired word of God, and that it is very helpful to use the context of the ancient people and what they believed in developing our theology. Now, for those reasons, that is exactly why I think he is dead wrong about this, and anyone who believes this is dead wrong about it. So before I begin to refute this, let's just talk about cosmology, specifically Israelite cosmology. So there are plenty of diagrams that you can find if you look up ancient Hebrew cosmology, like, any of the top 3 are probably very helpful. And so you look at it, it's got 3 tiers of how the earth looks, okay? So it's the top tier, the heavens, you got where God lives above the firmament, like I already broke down, the sky, the stars, and then you got earth, and then underneath that, you got Sheol and the great deep, okay? Okay, we got that down. That's what ancient Hebrew cosmology looks like. Now, this 3-tier system is found in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. I'll also mention, too, that the interesting thing about the firmament and the waters above the sky, I used to believe, personally, that the firmament was, it collapsed in and that's what caused the flood. I no longer believe that because a reason that we'll get to, but if you believe that, keep an open mind about this, okay? I promise. So, what he got right was that they certainly believed that the sky was a firm dome over the earth. Like Job, I think, references it as being like made of cast iron and stuff like that. They also believed that some stars moved and some stayed because some of them they believed were animate beings, because if something moves, they think it's an animate being. This whole cosmology is also where we get the concept that if you point up and you say, oh, God lives up there, that's where he lives, that's where he dwells, and that's not necessarily wrong, but it's not also completely accurate. So he has it right about how the ancient Israelites would have understood the shape of the earth and how it works. There's other language in there, like pillars holding up the sky, stuff like that. But I still think his reasoning as to this being the Bible's definitive teaching on the shape of the earth is flawed. And there are 2 ways you could go about this. You could actually look at some of the verses that he mentions and try to read them in context and see what they're really saying. Or you could do what I'm going to do, which is not give credence to an argument that doesn't even deserve it, and just say that his premise is completely faulty, okay? So he's making Genesis out to be something that it's not, all right? So the Bible, but especially Genesis, it was never meant to be a science textbook, okay? We only think of it that way. We only think that it should be because we live in a post-Enlightenment world, one that looks for the scientific reason for everything, and we often leave out the context of the original thoughts of the ancient people. So I'm going to use an illustration here that I heard that I think is very helpful when it comes to explaining this. So you have a 6-year-old child. She can say, God made my baby brother. A scientist comes along and says, no, he didn't. Your parents did. Okay, think about that for a minute. We're able to parse out both parties as being both right and wrong on some parts, okay? We understand the context of a 6-year-old understanding something very simply, like the most rudimentary version of it, without any of the details that they'll learn as they'll get older. And we also understand the silly idea of the scientist thinking that he needs to correct the child and refute that assertion. So what does this mean? Where does this lead us? A person's framework for truth may be flawed due to imprecision or a lack of understanding, but their truth claims can still be correct. keep that in mind as we keep going here. So in the illustration I just gave before, God really is responsible for all life. We can zoom out as far as we want to get that. And we actually know how babies are made. The child's parents did make them. Now, the worldview that the Bible provides is pre-scientific in some respects, but its truth claims are still right. They're as solid as a cast iron firmament. You go all the way up there, you knock on it, bang, bang, bang. No, I'm joking, of course. But it's sort of like how we colloquially use, like, love is coming from my heart, that sort of thing. We tie emotions to the heart. Or, you say trust your gut. You tie emotions to your gut because that's where we feel them. But we know that the chemicals that are actually coming about are mostly coming from our brain. Take another example that I find really fascinating as we rabbit trail off again. This is an example of a separation you can make in this point I'm making between truth claims that are found in just the general worldview that the Bible provides, and then also truth claims that actually have some sort of scientific backing because they are found in the very instructions that God gave on Mount Sinai, the Torah. So let's take a look at Numbers 19 for a second, and the water of purification. The recipe for this includes the ashes of a red heifer, hyssop, cedar wood, and scarlet wool. So this almost seems like a superstitious potion, and that's probably how the ancient people thought of it. But how we understand it today is completely different. Yet it still enforces the same truth. If you pour water through ashes, you get lye, L-Y-E. In more diluted solutions, lye is a great exfoliator. Then hyssop, it contains the antiseptic thymol, which is popular in a lot of hygiene solutions and today is quite expensive. The leaves actually have a mold on them that contains penicillin. The oil from cedar wood would have had a slight skin irritant that would have encouraged scrubbing, and the wool added fibers, or the added wool fibers, they are great still for cutting through thick grime and grease. So what we have here is antibacterial soap in Numbers 19 that the people at the time wouldn't have seen it as. They would have just said, okay, this is the water purification that we need to use in our ritual cleaning. I think that was like a daily commandment, I believe. Now that's why, just to go off on a further rabbit trail, that's why so many Jews survived the Black Plague, and that led to more anti-Semitism from a lot of the areas that were killed off by the Black Plague because they saw the Jews surviving it because they were using antibacterial soap, a recipe from God. But that's a whole different thing, which is just ridiculous. But now you're starting to see why this argument that he's making kind of treats Genesis as something that it's not, which is an issue. It's like getting mad at your dog for not being a cat. It's never supposed to be one. God clearly didn't think it important enough to specify these things to us from a scientific perspective, but allowing the worldview of the ancient people to be good enough. Ancient cosmology was never meant to be scientific. It never was. It's all about, and this is a common theme throughout all of these issues, it's about theological messaging. Now, this is where we run into the massive problem about how he thinks that the descriptions of ancient Hebrew cosmology lining up with the descriptions of other Near East cosmology reinforces that this has to be true. In fact, this is a horrible argument. This is awful, really, really, really bad if you're trying to go the apologetics route and say that the Bible is the inspired word of God. Now, why? Normally we think, okay, if we have multiple accounts saying the same thing, then that has to mean that there's some truth to it. Well, not when you have less information than we do now, okay? So if we want to say that the Bible is the inspired word of God and the Israelites had some sort of extra divine knowledge on this given to them by God, then the fact that the other religions, the other cultures had similar ideas has to enforce that they were also divinely inspired in terms of their cosmology as well. Because if the Israelites knew better from God giving them this exact cosmology, then the pagans having the same one means that they also have to had divine revelation. And I don't think we want to get into an area where we have to start treating pagan literature as divine or inspired. That is an issue. So it doesn't make any sense in that respect to say that that is the Bible's definitive teaching on the shape of the earth, that it even gives one. No, that is just the cosmology of the people at the time. It's not scientific. It's not meant to be. So you can't treat it like that. You have to just let it be what it is. And if we let the inspired word of God be what it is, then you still have the uniqueness of its theological arguments. Like that God created all of this. That God is the Most High. He is in control of all of this because he created it. And he created humans. That theological positioning like that is a big part of the Old Testament anyway. You know, like I referenced in last episode with Psalm 91 being about Canaanite entities and basically calling them punks and saying that they don't have any control over the Most High. That's pretty cool. But if you treat Genesis as a definitive scientific revelation, I guess you could say, I know I'm kind of mixing how that word is being used, but if you treat Genesis like that, then you lose all of that. It takes away glory from God. So don't use that argument. That is very bad. The Bible does not teach definitively on the shape of the earth. It is just what the people believed, because guess what? They didn't climb mountains. They didn't have the ability to do that. They didn't go too far deep into the sea. They just didn't do any of that. So they kind of had to collectively come up with ideas based off of what they could observe. Whew. Okay. So now I think the mention of Psalm 91 and Canaanite entities and stuff like that is a great way to tie into this next conspiracy, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's really just, it's exhausting. And anyone who has done any amount of apologetics online has heard this one before. And it is the most mid-wit argument that you can make. Okay? When I say mid-wit, look at the bell curve, and midwits are like the people at the very top. You know, they're with all the other people who think that they're smart, but they're not really. They're just average intelligence. Anyway, okay. What these people claim is that the Bible is just a copy of other ancient religions. And I'm getting to the point where I've already screamed enough about the first topic that I'm getting a headache, man. Whew. Okay, anybody who claims this, again, is just not letting Scripture be what it is or what it is meant to be. But this argument is very efficient in being antagonistic towards both Christianity and Judaism. But they never think to ask why there are overlaps in language, okay? Now, we can really dispel a lot of this, on the topic of why humans even exist between Judaism and Christianity and the rest of the religions of the ancient Near East. And the topic of humanity, the idea that humans were created by God out of love in order to have a covenantal relationship with him, that is completely foreign to those religions. Completely foreign. Not one of them would affirm that statement at all. Nowhere will you find that in another ancient text. Most of them will say that the gods created man to be their slaves, which is a pretty convenient story to tell if, I don't know, you're maybe an entity in Egypt. You get all these people who fear you because you're a supernatural entity, so they serve you as slaves, and then maybe a few thousand years later you go tell a dude, write this down, and the people who believe it will be very rich and successful and famous, and but whatever, go listen to episode 2. Maybe there'll be a bit more information there. Because as of right now, YouTube says it has no views. Oh, that's great. Oh my gosh, why am I even doing this? But anyway, let's expand. We can expand that whole part about humanity out even further. Humanity being made in the image of God, having free will and the ability to represent God on earth, be his proxy, democratizes and spreads out to all of humanity what the ancient Near East attributed only to royalty. See, take into consideration again Egypt, the pharaohs. They were considered to be god kings. They were human, but they were also gods. Horus incarnate, for example. Again, the idea of the average, every person, every man, woman, and child being able to be God's divine imager, that is completely foreign. So don't say that the Bible is just copying these other religions, because it's just not. It's just not. Not one other religion, I guess you could even say in the history of the world, including the modern ones, has even thought that. None of them have even made a case for that outside of Christianity and Judaism, what you will find in the Bible. Oh my goodness. Again, it's all about theological messaging, and so much of the Old Testament is responding to that other literature. And they respond to it because other people are familiar with it. Not only the other people of other religions, but it serves as a great illustration for the Israelites themselves. The difference is that the theology is radically unprecedented. Radically unprecedented. Now, we can look at another example of this that I really like. If you follow the Instagram, again, negativespace.pod, I hinted at this on my story, which I've been posting on like a madman lately. Daniel 7:13. I am reading from the ESV. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Okay, what is interesting about that passage? The phrase with the clouds or coming with the clouds was a phrase almost exclusively in the ancient Near East used for Baal or Baal or Baal or however you pronounce it. I don't know. I don't care. I say Baal. That's how I was taught. It said, and that's people where I'm from just use the long version of vowels anyway. So anyway, it's almost exclusively used for Baal, and Baal was considered by many in the Near East to be the god of the gods, the head honcho. But is this saying that God and Baal are the same entity? No, not at all. It's killing two birds with one stone here. It's attributing the status of the Most High to the God of Israel, and for the average Near East person, they would have understood that because of the phrase coming with the clouds. And then it's mocking Baal too, saying that the God of Israel is better than him. He stole his clouds. It's like the dude in Detroit who had his porch stolen. You can't have anything in the ancient Near East. Anyway, again, it's theological messaging. That is what it's about. The Israelite authors, they seem to make a point about this more than any other ancient pagan religion, which is what made the scriptures so powerful to the people, and they make them still powerful today. Kind of like what I was talking about before. Even if we don't fully understand the ancient context of it, if our worldview is different due to inaccuracies, our truth claims can still be correct. We can still understand the truth claims. Anyway, you can take a look at Exodus 2. Now, this, I think, is really, really, really freaking cool. So there's a lot of overlap between the story of Exodus and mentioning the gods of Egypt. And the plagues in Egypt were simply signs of war against the Egyptian gods from the Almighty. So maybe keep this in mind alongside what I spoke about in episode 2 with Aleister Crowley creating disciples of Iwas, the Egyptian entity, and how the 7 last plagues in Revelation are the same as the last 7 plagues of Egypt. Hopefully that connects some dots for someone else like it did me. I'm just kind of an eschatology nerd sometimes, but whatever. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. The Exodus account has, huge implications overall. Not only that they parallel with Revelation 2, which I think is really cool. We see the Edenic covenant of be fruitful and multiply repeated. Israel is growing within Egypt. There are more Israelites in Egypt. More kids are being had. Population overall is growing. God wanted this for humanity so he could have a larger family and more people to act as his proxies on earth to be divine imagers of God. And, that's finally taking place in Egypt. Jacob takes Israel to Egypt to live under the rule of Joseph, who became number 2 there. So Israel had the resources to grow. Keep in mind, this is also when they're living in rebellion to God's command to go in and take Canaan, but they were too afraid to do so. But God is still getting what he wants here. The Israelites, at some point are now built up as the remnant of God's Edenic family and are point blank called the Son of God in chapter 4. And it's about time to clear the Amorites out, as in, the fulfillment of the iniquity of the Amorites. But now the plagues themselves, oh boy, this is legitimately really fascinating. So the Nile turned to blood. Okay, that is an attack directly on Pharaoh. The Egyptians, like I mentioned earlier, they believed him to be Horus incarnate. And that's what he was responsible for. Their water supply, which, if you're a desert religion, makes sense that you want your main deity to be in charge of that. It also attacked the deity Hapi, I think, Hapi. There are going to be some of these names I don't know how to pronounce. I'm just trying my best, man. He was credited with the annual flood of the Nile, which was important for farming. So blood in the water supply meant that they didn't have power over it. God did. The frogs, they were an attack on Heket, who is the goddess in control of the population and fertility. She was depicted as having the head of a frog, as were other deities in the Egyptian pantheon. But too many frogs meant that she wasn't really controlling anything. It was getting out of hand. Not to mention frogs, they were considered sacred since they were symbols of other entities. So even stepping on one was punishable by death. So imagine you've got all these frogs everywhere. You're bound to step on one, but now you're just shook because oh my gosh, this is a holy creature. I just stepped on one. I'm going to get killed for this. That's riveting. Then the lice that came. This is such a baller move by God, honestly, because the lice undercut everything. So the Egyptian priests, according to Herodotus, I don't know how to say it. He was a historian. He said that the Egyptian priests would shave their whole body every other day so that no lice or anything else like that would infest them or become present while they were serving their gods, because that would make them ritually unclean. So they would shave to stay ritually clean and, do their little cult rituals. That makes sense, but so the infestation of lice everywhere completely shuts them down. That means no sacrifices to the gods are being made. The sacred space is corrupt. They're out of business. They got a failing grade from the health inspector. That is crazy. Then you have the swarms, which were likely dung beetles. which were also considered holy. This was an attack on the Egyptian god Khepr, who was depicted as a man with a dung beetle for a head, and they believed he was the one who pushed the sun across the sky every day. Now, the livestock plague. We get a familiar face if you listen to episode 2, which apparently nobody has. Ptah, he was specifically attacked with this one. Their creation god, who is represented by an apis, I don't know how you say it, a bull. These bulls were special and were mourned as a pharaoh would be mourned if it died. So if all of these bulls are getting taken out, many a tear was shed by the Egyptians that day, man. Now, boils came about to dunk on Sekhmet, their goddess of disease, Sunu, their god of pestilence, and then Isis, their god of healing. Hail and locusts clowned on Nut, their sky goddess, Osiris for crops and fertility, and Set, the god of desert storms. And Nut actually got dunked on 3 times via the plague of darkness, as did Horus and Hathor. And then the death of the firstborn came because Pharaoh's firstborn was also considered a god. So really, this is what a lot of these overlaps or copies from the scripture are. From people that postulate that the Bible is just ripping these things and throwing them all in the blender and slapping them on with a fresh coat of paint. It's a total failure to realize the nuance in the arguments that Scripture is making and the point that comes from utilizing the same language. Of course, they don't care about that because nobody who makes these claims ever thoughtfully reads the same Bible they try to discredit, they try to knock down. No, why would they do that? That's inefficient. They don't want their worldview changed. And it's really infuriating because the people who do this, like, say, maybe Bart Ehrman, I will never miss a chance to hit Bart Ehrman with a stray. That dude is just, oh my gosh. Not only does he completely misunderstand the Gospels, I doubt he even understands Hebrew. But anyway, these types of people that make these arguments are the dumb person's idea of a smart person. It's one of the most mid-wit level arguments you can make because, again, you are just ignoring the nuance that is clearly there for you to read. Now, when I say this, I myself am not claiming to be smart. Far be it from me to do that. I'm sitting in my closet recording this, information that I didn't even come across myself. I'm not smart, but I know I'm not just one of these midwits on these topics. So midwits think that they're smart. They think that they're smart because they got a whole bunch of other people around them, all their other village atheists gathered together, who pat each other on the back and say, "Yeah, good job, man. You really showed those Christians with that one." Meanwhile, their arguments are just wrong. They're just wrong. They, again, refuse to see nuance, all that sort of stuff. That's kind of why I prefer ideas that are on the fringes, because that's where you find a lot of the real smart people and a lot of the real dumb people. I'm probably one of the real dumb ones, that is for sure, but I try to find the real smart ones to listen to. That's why I was on the whole seed oils are bad for you thing far before it ever became as mainstream as it is now. My mom can back that up. I was talking to her about that back in 2020, and I was throwing out vegetable oil that we had in the cabinets because it's just not good for you. But anyway, I'm not saying I'm smart by any means. Lord knows I've been wrong about this stuff more than I've been right. But that's why I like ideas on the fringes, because you don't end up being a midwit like these people that think they're smart, but they are the dumb person's idea of a smart person. I am looking directly and now pointing directly at you, Bart Ehrman. My goodness, what a clown. Okay. Now we get to a topic that I've been waiting to at least partially talk about for a little bit. I've been saving this one for maybe a rainy day. I knew I'd have to save at least a little bit for once I got a little better at this. I'm still not good at this. The podcast still is bad. But Today we get to talk about the topic of UFOs in the Bible. So, oh, buddy, buckle up and get ready for a shaky ride. Now, I'll first break out the old pickaxe of logic and undermine this guy who started this whole thing, Zechariah Sitchin. You may have heard of him. If it wasn't for his quote-unquote work, we wouldn't have shows on the History Channel like Ancient Aliens. He was kind of the one who started all that sort of postulating there. And he started the proliferation of all these weird alien ideas, I think really. In fact, now... He's so famous, so popular in these circles that I chuckle at this because this is like a real hater move, but a hater move for the right reason. My guy, Dr. Michael Heiser, he made a whole website called SitchinIsWrong.com. Dr. Heiser is an actual ancient languages scholar. Zechariah Sitchin only claims to be one. And he goes through all of the sources that Sitchin claims that back up his worldview, and he just says no, he's wrong. That's not in the text. I think that's hilarious. You should, if you're interested in this, you should go check it out. I'm gonna be getting some of my information from this segment from there. It's SitchinIsWrong.com. Again, it's done by Dr. Michael Heiser. He was, before he passed, unfortunately, he was an ancient languages scholar, theology scholar, biblical scholar, all that sort of stuff. He's specified in the Old Testament, and has frankly taught me just a lot. But anyway, Sitchin, he was left unchecked for a long time. Now, I don't even think that there's any evidence that he could really translate Hebrew. You know, he's Jewish, so he could probably read and speak it. But, you know, just like everybody who reads and speaks English isn't necessarily like a proofreader or good at it, I think that's the same thing with Zechariah Sitchin here when it comes to translating Hebrew. You know, an example of this that Dr. Heiser himself goes out of his way to prove is that I don't think Sitchin even understood the word Elohim. Okay, so Elohim is like an English word deer, as in the animal. Depending on the context of the passage, it could be singular or plural. In its simplest form, the word Elohim is basically a description of a spiritual entity, a spiritual being. So that means, you know, the God of Israel is sometimes referred to as Elohim, the proper term, but he is a species unique Elohim, a species unique spiritual entity, because he is the Most High, because he is the Creator. And you know, other passages like Psalm 82 will refer to the gods of the nations as Elohim as well. So either Sitchin was just, you know, ignorant to that, or he purposefully ignored it, because Heiser goes through every instance of Elohim in the Old Testament, and he still can't come up with the point that Sitchin is trying to make. And beyond Hebrew, he certainly couldn't decipher the ancient Sumerian tablets or the cuneiform tablets that he used to claim that they were visited by aliens. You know, that's just for sure. And that itself should break down any of Sitchin's claims compared to the writings of the actual people. It's like he's just wrong. He's just wrong from the get-go. Now, grammar, Hebrew grammar in particular, I don't know much about. Again, it's one of those things where I try to find the smart people who do know what they're talking about and distill information from them. So I'm not really going to be talking about that. What I'm going to be talking about is the places where people will often point, Sitchinites will point to as saying, oh, there are aliens in the Bible is here. And the place that we will start with this, I think this is kind of the main one that they use, is Ezekiel, particularly Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10. Now, Sitchin will claim that this is a description of a UFO with an internal combustion engine, and Ezekiel is seeing the skyship of the Elohim, distant extraterrestrial gods that set nation against nation. Now, I want you to pause. take, I don't know how long it'll take you to read it, maybe like 5-10 minutes, and read Ezekiel 1. Okay, it's crazy. It sounds kind of crazy, but we're gonna break down what it actually means here. So just pause the podcast, go read it. Okay, I'll be here when you're back. Why did you not pause it? Go actually read it. Come on, man. Okay, pause it right now. Go read it. Okay. Okay, now that you're back from actually reading it, hopefully, let's just break down what actually happens here. So in Ezekiel 1 and 10, the prophet sees a vision from God. Ezekiel sees 4 creatures. And here's the description from chapter 1. Because I know some of you didn't actually stop and read it, I'm going to actually go through what the passage says, or at least an excerpt of it. And this was their appearance. They had the figures of human beings. However, each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. The legs of each were fused into a single rigid leg, and the feet of each were like a single calf's hoof, and their sparkle was like the luster of burnished bronze. They had human hands below their wings. The 4 of them had their faces and their wings on the 4 sides. Each one's wings touched those of the other. They did not turn when they moved. Each could move in the direction of any of its faces. Each of them had a human face in the front. Each of them had the face of the lion on the right. Each of the 4 had the face of an ox on the left, and each of the 4 had the face of an eagle in the back. Such were their faces. As for the wings, they were separated. Above, each had two touching those of the others, while the other 2 covered its body, and each could move in the direction of any of its faces. They went wherever the Spirit impelled them to go, without turning when they moved. And then we have the classic passage about the wheels, the wheels within wheels, the ones, you see the 3D renderings of biblically accurate angels, whatever, okay? This is the passage that describes these. Dashing to and fro among the creatures was something that looked like flares. I gazed on the creatures. I saw 1 wheel on the ground next to each of the 4-faced creatures. As the appearance and structure of the wheels, they gleamed like beryl. All 4 of them had the same form, and the appearance of the structure of each was 2 wheels cutting through each other. And when they moved, each could move in the direction of any of its 4 quarters. They did not veer when they moved. Their rims were tall and frightening, for the rims of all 4 were covered all over with eyes. And when the creatures moved forward, the wheels moved at their sides. And when the creatures were born above the earth, the wheels were born too. So chapter 10 now adds a little more information. You can pause and read that. I'm not going to go through that here because there's no way I'm going to be able to fully read that at this point in the recording. But as is a pattern with a lot of prophecy, God gives one, and then when he gives a second version of it, there is more information added on to the first. See Daniel, and then Revelation after that. That is probably a whole different topic that I might want to talk about, but could get into some hot water there. Now, in chapter 10, we're given further information about the 4 creatures. They are cherubim, which are a classification of heavenly host. It's a type of angel. They have 4 faces, the cherub, human, lion, and eagle. And replacing ox with cherub there actually makes a lot of sense, because oftentimes in ancient iconography, there was a lot of overlap between oxen and cherubim. Cherubim were often visualized as oxen. And then both the wheels and the cherubim are covered in eyes, which has significance we will get to in a minute. So you have scholars like Daniel Block, who he has written a massive multi-book commentary on the entire book of Ezekiel, which is cool, and wow, how did you do that? He would argue that, and I agree with him, that the 2 visions are the exact same thing, just from different angles. I think that makes sense, and that makes sense in the pattern of how prophecy is revealed in other parts in the Bible. Since the inaugural vision, this is an excerpt from him, since the inaugural vision came to the prophet from the north, the frontal view, south, would have had a human face, with the other 3 being arranged as follows. And then he's got this little diagram where pointing north is an eagle, pointing east is the bull/cherub, pointing south is the human, and pointed west is the lion. And then Leslie Allen, in the World Biblical Commentary, Volume 1 of Ezekiel, notes that the 4 faces suggest the 4 cardinal directions of the zodiac, which originated in Babylon. Hey, that's where Ezekiel is writing from. Wouldn't you have it? Wait a minute. Are you going to tell me that this passage that people frequently take out of context and misinterpret is really about theological oh my gosh, I can't speak at this point. Theological positioning? Wow. My whole sarcastic statement there was messed up by my inability to speak, but we press on. Now, Dr. Heiser himself wrote, in Ezekiel 1, we read that the wheels were full of eyes. What does that have to do with the zodiac or astrology? Simple. The Hebrew word for eyes is ayin, which is apostrophe A-Y-I-N. This is a normal word for the body part through which we see. The same word is also used by Ezekiel, no less, in the same chapter to describe sparkling or gleaming. Cross-reference Ezekiel 1:4 and Ezekiel 1:16. Here's a suggestion. Eyes should be understood in Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10 as stars or sparkling things. This fits amazingly well with chapter 10, since they're both the creatures and the wheels have the eyes. Oh my gosh. See, I'm losing it. Have the eyes. Get it? Creatures, cardinal points of the zodiac, the creatures having eyes or stars in them. What creatures have stars? The ones you see in the sky, the signs of the zodiac. So what is this vision really? Because you got the big guy on top of all of these things floating around beneath them, okay? What does this all really mean? Because as far as I'm concerned, there are no signs of this being alien in any way. I really don't know how you can honestly, intellectually honestly interpret this as a UFO or anything alien in origin. To me, it's pretty clear. Okay? The vision is something that Ezekiel saw living in Babylon, writing to captive Israelites. Okay? That historical context is very important. He's writing to captive Israelites who are worried that Marduk, the Babylonian god, has defeated the God of Israel, their God. But Ezekiel is saying, no. You see these things that they use to keep track of time and they worship and all that sort of stuff? No, God is still above that. He is in control of these things. There's no need for you to worry. He wasn't defeated by Marduk. He's still on the throne, above all the other things that these goyim worship. Again, theological positioning. That is the name of the game, specifically and particularly in the Old Testament. In passages that are weird, we don't quite understand, it's probably theological positioning. Now, Jesus himself does this a few times in the New Testament, which are fascinating cases that I'm sure I'll talk about on a separate occasion. But that is the primary focus of debunking any of these wild claims about what the Bible teaches, is that the people who make these claims are not simply just not letting the Word of God be what it is, which is the proving of God above the other gods of the nations, above the other gods that other people were worshiping and probably still do worship now in esoteric ways. Like how we've got a rampant child sacrifice going on to what's his name? Oh, my alarm for my laundry is going off. Wow, that's great. See, you're always getting the oh my gosh, you're always getting the genuine version of me when I'm recording this. Anyways, enough about hot current political topics and how it relates to old world spiritualism. Because that is definitely a thing that I absolutely believe in. I will not be selectively supernatural with these things. But anyway, all this is about theological positioning. So the next time you hear someone make a wild claim about what the Bible teaches, that it teaches aliens or a flat earth or anything like that, that there's no way that the ancient people would have even thought about or even considered to be an idea that made any sense at all. The passage that is being taken, that is just being ripped out of context, is probably about proving God above the other gods. That's really what it is. So hopefully If you believed any of these things, I've convinced you to go the opposite direction. And uh, now, if you're just an average Christian who sometimes is an apologist and evangelist to other people, you can use this as further ammo against them and send those arguments to where they belong. You send them deep down in the Sheol. All right. Oh boy. Okay. Anyway, remember to like the podcast, like this episode. If you actually watched it, I got fewer viewers on episode 2 than I did 1, which is great. Subscribe, share this with other people you think might like it, because I covered a lot of interesting stuff today. And also go tell Aldi that they need to sponsor me. Go comment on their Instagram post. Don't harass them, but go comment on every Instagram post of Aldi. Hey, you know what I think of when I think of saving money at Aldi? I think of the Negative Space podcast, which is about conspiracy theories and weird theology and stuff like that. That's what they need to hear, so I can finally get that sweet Aldi sponsorship. Honestly, Aldi, if you're listening, if anybody at Aldi is listening to this, I will do it at a mega discount. I could even do it for free, so long as you officially say, "Yep, we approve of this." Just say you're an Aldi, you're sponsored by Aldi, you're an Aldi influencer. I want to be an Aldi influencer. Let's make this an Aldi influencer podcast as I talk about weird things, so we get more of the weird people listen to weird things like this shopping at Aldi. Okay. I think that is all. It's been a little under an hour. Wow, I'm surprised. This is the longest, text-wise script I've written. 9 pages of writing. Granted, it's not all solid. It's broken up into little pieces that make it easier to read as I'm going along. But I've had longer episodes with less information. I suppose I only did really cover 3 topics when in the past I've covered 4 or 5. But these ones were kind of the big ones that I saw that really peeved me, that really got me, and I'm glad I now have a platform to scream into the void about this, about things that are important to me or I think are weird or funny or whatever. So anyway, yeah, like, subscribe, share it, all that good stuff, and I think that is it for today. I love you. Goodbye.